"Hell Riders," a voice boomed from a dais in front of them. The whole of the company snapped to attention. The unified clattering of fists hitting metal chest plates, resonating throughout the hall. Zelvor looked up and honed in on High Rider Ironwill, who stood, stoic, at the front of the room. His sable hair pushed back and tucked neatly behind his horns. He wore a long red cape trimmed with fur around the neck, and held to his pristine armor with clasps bearing the Hell Rider crest. His flaming silver eyes analyzed the figures before him, and soon locked onto Zelvor, and the blaze within burned even brighter. "I have called you here to bear witness as one of our brothers-in-arms takes his oaths to become a fully fledged paladin." A horn sounded in the distance, and the company released their salute. "Quarter Zelvor Rhines, step forward." Zevlor's body stiffened, his feet refusing to heed the call of the High Rider. He felt Lucis nudge him again, this time pushing him forward slightly to give his feet something to follow. One foot in front of the other, he made his way to the dais where Ekris waited, his eyes locked onto the younger tiefling. Zevlor's breathing came out shallow and forced through his nose, but he continued forward. Ekris motioned for him to follow and led him to a nearby room, which held an intricate altar adorned with the symbols of the many deities of the known realms. Ekris shut the door behind them. "This doesn't take place in front of the company?" Zelvor asked, his voice betraying his nerves with a slight crack. "No, an oath is a sacred and intimate thing," the older rider explained, as he unstrapped his greatsword from his back. He set it in front of him as he stood waiting for Zelvor to get closer. "You will speak your oath privately to myself and the god to whom you have chosen to devote yourself. Once you have felt their presence, or lack thereof, we will return to the others and proclaim your new position." Zelvor nodded, his words catching in his throat. Helm could deny him, deem him undeserving, unworthy. Ekris stood to his left, hands gripping the hilt of his greatsword. "Kneel and bow your head." Zelvor did as commanded and knelt before the altar, his eyes pausing briefly on the ceremonial dagger lying at its center. He lowered his head, keenly aware of the hair tickling his face and the blood burning in his veins. His pulse rushed so loudly in his ears he barely made out the first question Ekris directed toward him. "What god have you chosen to devote yourself to?" "Helm, High Rider," he managed to respond with a slight wince when he stuttered. The paladin nodded. "Recite the first principle of devotion. Courage." Zelvor took a deep breath and steadied his mind, clearing it of everything but the thoughts of his devotion and the creed he would pursue in Helm's name. "Never will I fear to act, though caution is wise." The second principle, compassion. "I will aid others, protect the weak, and punish those who threaten them. I will show mercy to my foes, but temper it with wisdom." His legs began to tremble again. The distinct absence of divinity in the air sprouted a rising panic in his chest. He steeled himself again and closed his eyes tightly. Mustering every ounce of prayer and faith he had within him, he offered it all up to Helm. The third and final principle, honor. I will treat others with fairness, and let my honourable deeds be an example unto them." He waited, and waited. Nothing. No caress of a blessing or sense of peace. No blooming warmth or surge of grace. Hot tears of embarrassment and shame pricked at the edges of his eyes, but he refused to let them fall in front of the High Rider of all people. He had fought through the war. He had protected the weak, had protected his city. He had seen his comrades fall, seen them rise again as undead. What else did he need to do to prove his worth? As he lamented, he felt the air shift, and his eyes snapped open to find Ekris now standing in front of him. With deft fingers, the High Rider removed one of his own gauntlets and set it down nearby. He turned briefly to the altar, and returned with the dagger in his hand. He drew its edge swiftly across his palm, and blood began to spill from the cut it left in its wake. Crimson pooled in his palm and dripped onto the floor, a stark contrast to the greying stone. The rider knelt in front of Zelvor and held out his wounded hand. "Channel your divine power and lay hands upon me to heal my wound," he instructed softly. "This is an ability only paladins can use. If you succeed, Helm has accepted you. If you fail, he has not." Zelvor lifted his hands, trying and failing to quell their trembling. He flexed his fingers, trying to feel the circulation within them once more as he stared at the dark red liquid staining Ekris's palm. He cradled the High Rider's injured hand in one of his own, held his other over the top of the gash, and took a shuddering breath. He closed his eyes, focusing on the magic his god would bestow unto him, and prayed. At first he felt nothing. No tingle, no wave or crash, no surge of magic or divine power anywhere in his body, let alone in his hands. He squeezed his eyes shut even tighter, pouring everything he could into this one moment. It started in the soles of his feet first, then rapidly spread up his legs, through his chest, and across his arms. Rays of golden light erupted from his hands and body all at once. He opened his eyes with a gasp, tears rolling down his cheeks as the intensity of the blessing overcame him. Glancing down at the hand before him, he saw that the blood had faded, and the cut had all but disappeared. All that remained, as proof of the wound, were the dark droplets that lay drying on the floor.